to answer your question, Stephen, yes. So I now write those things down. And when I look back at, wow, I actually had this conversation with Phil when we were starting years ago as to my goals and the next things that I wanted to do. An easy one was doing yoga. And then I look at where I'm at now and I'm like, wow, I did those things. So now it's time to reevaluate, set new goals, and then see where I'm at, in a year, 2, 3 from now.
Welcome to the Success Flow Podcast, where our mission is simple: to be better each day and relay our findings with other relentless humans defining success for themselves. If that sounds like you, let's begin.
All right, back at it on the Success Flow Podcast, and this one's near and dear to our hearts. The beauty of these podcasts is being able to bring in those closest to you, and that is what we have today with our guest, Marcos Rodriguez. Marc, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks, guys, for having me on here. I've listened to all your podcasts; they've been awesome, and so I'm honored to get the invite. So I'm good, though. I'm good.
Yeah, this is gonna be a fun one. We all three of us go way back. Phil, you and Marc go back a few years before me and Marc. I think I met Marc was like the first guy that Phil introduced me to when I first met Phil. In 2008? I think is how far back Phil and I go. But you guys go all the way back to college. You both are. Neither of you are from here, right? You came from St. Louis, Phil, and El Paso, right, Marc?
Yes, sir.
And so you guys came out to ASU. So bring us back a little bit how you two fools met and all the shenanigans you used to get into. And then we'll talk about how we all continue to stay connected through various parts of our lives.
For sure. So I'll give you the condensed version. Came to ASU for a semester with my best friends, Brian and Brandon, they're twins. Came for a semester, went back to graduate from UTEP, and then came right back because we loved Arizona so much. When we moved back, me and the twins and the older brother, we all lived at the same place. It's a condo complex. And I remember two of them were out here before we were. And I remember them saying, "You're going to love it out here." We met these two guys at the time. One of them was Phil, which I didn't know, and Dano, who was your ride or die at the time, Phil. And he said, "They're big out here. They're buff and cut out here. We're going to love it." And so fast forward, a couple weeks later, we moved down and we met Phil. Phil was the youngest one of the whole group, still is. And it grew from there. So that's like a condensed version of how we how we came from Texas, came to Arizona, and then ended up linking up with Phil, which then again, Stephen, we met you through Phil. So.
That's that's how I remember it as well. And Dana was definitely more buff and cut than I was at the time. That's for dang sure. But at that point, it's a good way to kind of start out. Like when you say we were in college, I was just going into college. Marc was just exiting. All these guys were just exiting, which was a huge edge for me because I learned so much about life from Marc and these guys out the gate that you don't get in school. My parents didn't tell me, and we can jump into some of that, but just right place, right time. And that apartment complex that we lived in, nowadays, they're kind of common, right? To have these like resort style complexes. But at the time there weren't that many. They're the Mark Taylors or whatever, but there was a sand beach going into the pool, a great gym where we worked out at. And just a very special place, and we hung out all the time in those common areas of the complex. So it made it pretty easy. But that's a perfect place to start out, Marc, because one of the things that came across right away, and to this day is still the same, is your work ethic. And even back before you moved to Arizona in El Paso, you were the one in the group that always had a job and were bringing in your own money. So talk us through that, like back where that stemmed from when you were a kid or as you were becoming a man. Talk us through that and how that kind of carried on into your professional life.
Yeah, for sure. Real quick before I do that, I remember just a funny story. When we met Phil, who are you here with, right? Who's your roommate? And he would mention his roommate, who by the way was his aunt Kim, and so he would refer to her as his roommate.
As his roommate?
Yes. Yes. But I digress. So back to
Oh,
work.
God, that's so funny.
Yeah. So back to work ethics. So it is. I started off young, man. So I was 15 when I had my first job, and it was a paper route. Right. So at the time when you're 15, it's kind of the worst job to have because you want to sleep till 1 p.m. Right. And paper routes start at around 4. So you can separate the paper, roll it up, have it loaded up by 5, and then have it delivered by 6. Right. 6 a.m. is when the early birds come out to get their paper and their coffee. And so that was my very first job at 15. My dad would take me and my brother, who would sometimes show up and sometimes not. And we would ride, maybe not the safest, but we grew up in a smaller town at the time. Now El Paso's huge. We would ride on the hood of the car with our papers, and we'd throw them out to whoever was subscribing. So it started then, and since 15, at the time, my dad would get the payment for the route, and then he'd give it to us, right? And so that's when I thought, okay, I'm making my own money, right? It wasn't much, maybe $60 every couple of weeks or something. But then when I was 17, I got my first actual job and what I mean by that is where a check was cut out to me, right? And that was at a grocery store. It's called Big 8. I don't know if it exists anymore in El Paso, but I was bagging groceries. And I remember every 2 weeks I'd get about $150. And $150, I felt like I was at the time I had so much money, and I'd give 50 to my mom just because she's my mom, and I was always taught, you give back. And so I would give 50 to her so she could go buy whatever she wants. She would always spend it on her kids. Came up with 4 brothers or 3 brothers and a sister, so it would always be spent back on the family. Um, but I had that, and so those $150 was a lot of money for me at the time. From there, as I progressed and got older and went through college, my first real job, I guess I could say I had, is Countrywide Home Loans. That's when I entered the mortgage industry about 20 years ago, and I will say that was one of my favorite jobs. Not only what they taught me, but it was honestly, if you've watched The Wolf of Wall Street, um, that was Countrywide. It was exactly like that. So it was wild times.
No way.
Yes, I was a young kid. I was a broker, making probably way too much money that I knew what to do with. I spent my money foolishly. And then fast forward to that, the crash happened. Right. Um, Bank of America took over Countrywide, and Bank of America was pretty corporate at the time. The culture was completely different. Um, I can honestly say when I worked for Bank of America, that's where I lost my work ethic. I had it from 15 all the way till then. I like making my own money. I like spending my money on the things that I could buy. And at the time, my dad always told me, "It's your money, son. I'll never tell you what to do with your money, but be responsible." And he'd kind of show me the way. So I'm a B of A. I definitely have lost my work ethic because the market's down. I'm not making any money. I have a BMW that I can't afford anymore. I've wasted my money foolishly, and I became that negative attitude that I'm going to do the bare minimum I can here just not to get fired. I'm not going to volunteer for anything. That was me. That's where I lost my work ethic. The market started to get a little better. I saw that in myself and I didn't like it. I didn't like coming into work and being perceived as like the negative guy. And so slowly I noticed that within myself and I started to change myself. So eventually opportunities came up for advancement and I would apply for these opportunities and get interviews. And in the end, some of the things I was told is, hey, you just, we know you as you're kind of negative. You create noise. You're not here for the team. And so getting that feedback was huge to me, um, because that perception of what I know I wasn't was reality. And I was being told this is the reason why, you're not going to get selected for being a promotion or manager, go on and so forth. So I was there for about 2 more years, and one of my good friends, Kevin, who was working at Rocket at the time, in the underwriting area, said, "Hey, why don't you come on over to Rocket?" And so once I weighed my options, I said, "You know what? I'll do that, and I'm going to go into the underwriting route versus the banker route." And I knew then and there, I have to change my attitude. I have to change. I want to get back to what I was. And so I went in with a great attitude. No one knew me there, right? Smiling, having conversations with people I didn't know, volunteering for things, getting back to what I was before, and what I felt I had lost. And fast forward 10 years, I've been there 10 years. I'm currently a director of underwriting here at the Phoenix location, and I love it. What Rocket has done for me and provided for me as a man and in my family and just in life in general, I could not be more happy there. So that's kind of how it started, where I kind of went off the rails a little bit, and I'm back, baby.
That's awesome. I love that story, especially the paper route story. Like your first job, like thinking back of what that looked like. Which brother was this? Was this Shield,
Shields.
Surge, or your older brother?
No,
Shields.
yeah, it was Shields. So yeah, I'm the oldest, and then he would show up.
And then you have
Yes.
Aiden. Yeah, that's awesome. I can visualize you guys sitting on the hood, just tossing and probably making a competition out of it. My first job was I was a gate painter, painting fences, like wooden fences in middle school. And my parents did something similar and taught me like how to balance a checkbook and profit and loss, and probably made like $300 that summer, but it was cool. Right. And like having that upbringing is definitely super helpful into, building your own business or being that entrepreneur that we talk about, and being successful in your career. And so you've been in the real estate space, mortgage. You've seen the ups and downs of the mortgage industry, and currently we're in. It seems like we're climbing out a little bit. Rates dropped about 1.5. I think the last time I read, most recently down below 7, which is still pretty high. But from your perspective, like how is Rocket dealing with that? How are you? The realtors and everyone you've seen out there. How are the ones that are, not everyone is struggling. There are people that are making massive success out of the market in downturns, and they're not letting it get to the best of them, right? They're not being negative about the situation that they can't control, and they're just pushing through. So from your perspective on the other side, the underwriting, what have you seen there?
Yeah, so it's funny because when, as you mentioned, I've been in the mortgage industry a total of almost 20 years, right? And so I've been there when it's good, and when it's not, right? And then right now with the high rates, inflation, and also it's just slow around mortgages towards the holidays, right? People are looking to spend money on traveling and time with their family. And it's just always the slow part. The thing that I've loved about working at Rocket is that's when we spend money. We spend money when times are bad, so that we're there and so that we're remembered as a name brand of when kind of some of these players that are starting to exit the market because they don't, they foresee it's kind of expensive, the rates are high, so on and so forth. We stay in it. And so the name is still there. People remember, well, when no one gave us a chance or was willing to, take our loans, and you guys were still there. And so it is definitely slower, but this is what it is, right? It's good when it's good, and when it's bad, you have to realize how to, one, manage your money, and realize that these great times aren't always here. And when they're there, you got to take advantage of them. So when it's slow times like it is now, you've built your nest egg, you've built that little savings that is going to get you through these times, because eventually rates will come back down. Everyone that is still buying, people are still buying, are going to then want to get into those lower rates, which will then start a little bit of a refinancing boom, so on and so forth. So it's just a waiting game right now.
Yeah, I've got a lot of realtor friends that have gone through a bunch of things, and they're similar, right? They talk about that, where you've got to look at it as a business. Like, you're a realtor, you're getting paid commissions, you're a broker and whatever, but it should be funded to an LLC, to a business bank account, and you are a business owner as a realtor, and you have to look at it as, what are the things that are going to, historically, there's always not necessarily a crash. 2008 was pretty brutal, but a dip. And I think that's smart, like what you said, planning ahead to average it out. Really good years, go hard, make as much as you can or do what you can, and then prepare yourself for the dips, and then you get through and kind of manage that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think this is where we specifically make a difference. When it's busy, right, and there's loans coming in all the time, a loan is a loan, right? You want to get all the loans done, but sometimes you can't. Right now, because we're in the spot we're in, every single loan matters, and every single loan to that broker, that realtor matters, because that could be their only loan right now, right? And so you've got to get creative when it comes to marketing, to making and looking at the picture holistically. Is this, can we make this loan work? Because we know that at the end of the day, they're relying on that loan to close in the market we're in. And so that's one thing that, I'm really happy about being at Rocket, is that we spend that money and we make those decisions based off.
That's kind of, it takes back to the discipline thing, right? Making the right decisions and sticking with a plan, knowing the cycles. You've always talked about that. And we're all the guests we bring on, where we always talk about the business athlete mindset. And I wanted to give you a shout out there, because it's had a big impact on me. No matter what, even back in our days hitting the nightlife, quite heavy, to say the least, you've always, you've worked that into your budget from a consumption and output perspective of, I'm going to hit the gym, whether it's vanity, or maybe at that time it was more vanity than for performance. But you always had you were not going to miss the gym more than a couple days in a row. And your diet has always been on point, except for one of the most unappealing Saturday cheat meals that I've ever heard of, which we can talk about. It actually makes me kind of gag a little bit as we're bringing it up.
I want to know what meal is that? I don't know anything about that one. You got it. Mark's cracking up. He can't hold himself together.
But I want you to talk a little bit about that, where that came from, and how you've maintained that discipline over the years, keeping it lean and mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, Phil, at first when I was young, it probably was vanity, right? I remember being in the back of the twins' house, and we would fill up laundry jugs with water, right? And that would be kind of our curls. And then he had one bench, and we'd work out.
Nice.
And so it
Girls
started
for the
in middle.
girls.
Absolutely. And again, part of it was vanity. It started in middle school, and it hasn't stopped. And it's become part of just who I am as a person. I go to the gym, or I try and go at least 5 times in the week. So, 7 days, I try and go 5. But I've always, if I don't go, I don't feel the best version of myself, right? And the way I make myself go is, one of the things that I can't stand when people say, and I've said it plenty of times, is I don't have any time, right? I'm planning something, I don't have time. I have a kid now that I got to take to school, and I got to be there when I get out of work. I don't have time. You have time. You just have to make time, right? And so I'll give you an example. I take my daughter to school every Tuesdays and Wednesdays. My wife is at work at 6:30 a.m., Janessa. And so I take her school starts at 8:45. So when my wife leaves at 6:30 a.m., I'm there until I take her to school, and then I'm back around maybe 7 p.m. Right, and then I'm there to spend that last hour with her with my daughter before I put her to bed. And so where would I work out? And so I don't like doing it, but I wake up at 5 a.m. On those days, I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. to be at the gym by 5:15 to get back so Janessa could go to work by 6:30 a.m. So I do have time. I just have to make time. And a mantra, you guys talk about mantras. Stephen, I heard your mantra a couple episodes ago about like what you say every morning. And so my mantra actually comes from a famous bow hunter, Cameron Haynes. And it's nobody cares, work harder. Right. That is my favorite saying in the world. And at those moments when it's like 4:45 and my alarm's going up, and in my head, I'm thinking I'm sore from yesterday. Maybe I had a dinner and I had a glass of wine, and I'm just a little off. I should probably just sleep. That's what I say to myself. Nobody cares, work harder. And that gets me up. And as soon as I'm up, I'm off to the races. And so because of that, I feel once the workout's done now, and especially in the mornings, I'm ready to go. It's 8 a.m. and I'm ready to go in sharp. First waking up at 7, showering, getting at work, and I'm still kind of in the haze of just starting a new day. So I do want to end with this, is that on this part anyway, Lamar Jackson, the quarterback for the Ravens, he did a press conference one time, and he had the Cam Haynes shirt that said "Nobody cares, work harder," which I loved. I think I took a screenshot and sent it to everybody.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a great line. I never heard that one. I'm going to add it because it is powerful. Like just saying that to yourself, nobody cares, work harder. Like when you feel like shit and you don't want to do anything, and you just you can't not get up and go, right? I mean,
absolutely.
That's awesome. That's impactful. You say he's a bow hunter, Cam Haynes?
Yes. Yeah. He's one of the most famous bow hunters, and
he's an animal.
Oh yeah.
Is he? Yeah. So hunting's not something I grew up with. My dad wasn't into that. And so I wasn't taught that too much, but I know you both are, and Mark probably a lot more than Phil these days. I've seen your hunts and the pictures you send in our group text. You've done all sorts of big game hunting and whatnot. So talk about that, man. What does that do for you to just get out in nature and like you have no cell service, you have nothing, and just you plan those trips every year?
I'm gonna jump in here real quick and tee this up because it's been awesome to see. I remember when we first started hanging out, and Mark couldn't even pull a fish off a hook without squirming. And I would tell him about like getting out and hunting, thinking that, and I, have done, as you mentioned, Stephen, at this point, about 10% of what Mark's done. And just to see him, he's gone through the stratosphere in regard to his appreciation of the craft. And just seeing that from where we started is insane about defining success for yourself and what you truly want. But I had to jump in there to set some context for Mark.
Well, I think that just shows that Mark goes all in no matter what. When he likes something, he's going to go all in and just, he's dedicated. So
Yep.
I've definitely learned that a lot about you and everything. But yeah, the hunting aspect is awesome. I want to hear tell us some stories.
Absolutely. And just I didn't grow up hunting at all. I didn't start hunting till I was like, so I'm 42 now, probably 10 years ago. And like Phil mentioned, I never been fishing till then. I caught my first fish that I caught, I rolled all the way up and I let some of the string down and it kind of swung towards me and I freaked out. I was on the boat. Yeah. I was like, oh, I don't know what to do. And people on the shore saw me and were laughing. So I did not grow up hunting. I never had besides a BB gun, I never held a gun, much less a bow. And the way I got into it is, the guys I mentioned before, Brian, Brennan, and Mike, the guys that moved down from Texas with, we all came down together and they just, started life as far as the kid and getting married, avenue much faster than I did. And so once you start having kids and getting married, right, your time shift is to those tendencies. And so it was great, but they wouldn't come out a lot, right? I'd invite them and I understood, nope, I got a brand new baby. And so I met up with my other group of friends. Abe Clark was one of them. And I remember he just asked me one time, he's like, you want to come hunting? And I'm like, what's that? He's like, well, we go out, we look for animals, and then at night we party. And so I was like, oh, I'm in. The first hunt I ever went on, it was amazing. I did not know what it was until I was out there. And so, as you mentioned, I started about 10 years ago and I am all in. It is the best way I could describe it. It is the hardest, most gratifying thing that I've done, from the miles you put on, from when it all comes together, which is probably only 10% of the time, right? You go out there, the success rates are very low. But my point in saying this is when it all comes together and you see, you take an animal that you're eventually going to process and it's going to feed you for, at least a year and you could share with friends and family. All the struggle, all the miles put on, the hard things all come together and you're like, it is all worth it. You can't wait to get back home. And once you're back home and you're like, oh, I'm so glad I'm sleeping on a bed. I haven't showered in 14 days. I just took my first shower. You think you're over it. The next day you're like, God, I wish I was back there. And just the first time I actually, took an animal, I felt weird, man. I went up there, it was with a rifle, it was with my buddy. I shot it, and my first time shooting at anything. It fell down, and it was up a mountain. And my friends are, all right, get up there. We're gonna go get the buggies. We're gonna go get the stuff, and we'll meet you. It was in Flagstaff, and there was snow everywhere. And so I went up there. And I remember getting up there and looking at this pretty much the size of a cow, right? You never get close enough to realize how big elk are until, you harvest one and it's there lying in front of you. And I remember looking at the elk, first animal I've ever killed, and feeling some type of way where I was sad. I was upset because I said, this thing was just eating grass. There was still grass in its mouth. Like, what did I do? Like, why did I do this? Those were the feelings that went up to me. And when my buddies came up about 30 minutes later, again, my very first time doing anything like that, I remember my buddy Abe saying, you haven't even started processing it. I'm like, I don't even have a knife. I don't know what to do. And so fast forward 10 years, I say it's the most gratifying, hardest thing I've ever done, is because when it comes together and you respect that animal by, getting it processed and then eating it and making spaghetti and steaks and summer sausage and then sharing it with your friends and family. You want to talk about clean eating, grass-fed, free range, organic. It doesn't get better than that. And I'll probably have steaks, cow steaks, maybe 5 times a year. Phil cooks them up sometimes at his house. I'll go there and get them, maybe at a restaurant. But besides that, that's all I eat. And I try and incorporate it everything I do. So that's kind of how I got into hunting and why I think it's done. I'm the best version of myself when I come back from a hunt, is what my wife tells me.
That is perfect tee up for my next question. You and I've talked a lot about the meditative state and getting away from the getting off grid and trying to actually get with your thoughts. Can you talk a little bit about that feeling out in the middle of nowhere, mostly by yourself, and the impact that that's had?
Yeah. And I think I've told you this before, Phil. When I'm in different hunts, I had different areas. When I'm in Canada, for instance, a lot of the time I'm in a blind. You're in a blind from sun up to sundown, right? So you're out there by 6 a.m. and you don't get picked up till 7 p.m. During that time, sitting in one spot, not moving, all you everything runs through your head, everything. And so there's only so many podcasts you can listen to, and you don't even want to have headphones on because you want to hear things coming, right? So you can bring them, and I've done it at times with one in my ear, but typically when I go out there, it is my time to work on me. And what I mean by that is I start replaying the things that I've done. Some of could I have done this better, right? When it comes to either my professional career or being a better husband or being a better father, and all those things go through my head. Having that much time all day for 7 days in a row just to think and meditate on how you can, what do I want my life to look like after this going forward? Everything goes through your mind. That's so much time just to be in your head. I still say this kind of just jokingly, is that I'm 42 and I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And I say that because when I'm in these meditation states, when I'm just waiting and hanging out sometimes at the sauna 20 minutes when I don't have my AirPods on, I love where I'm at, and I'm fortunate to be where I'm at, but I want to create something. I want to do something, and that's why I say that. It all comes from that time in the woods, though, to answer your question.
That's exactly why we wanted you on this pod.
Yeah, for sure. You're definitely not alone. I think we're all striving for success and trying to figure out what we want the rest of our lives to look like. What do we want to be when we grow up? I have a question for you. Do you ever write that stuff down, or do you just run it through the head and then just hopefully remember a lot of it?
Yep. So two things. I'll answer that way. Two things. I remember meeting with Phil a long time ago, maybe 2-3 years ago, and he mentioned, asked me, what do you want to do? Whether it's your personal time, whether it's your what are your aspirations and plans, and he told me get a book or notepad and write it down. And not too long ago, I had another conversation with Phil and we plan to meet up again. But then I started going through and I found that notebook that I had because I moved from my house and I'm in another place temporarily. But I found that moving and I looked at it and we talked about three things, which came to me during the time hunting and meditating. And one was I wanted to start doing hot yoga. The other was I wanted to sell my home to eventually acquire land. I've written those things down, still in my house. Fast forward, I've do hot yoga every week. I've sold my home, which was bittersweet because I loved that house, and I've acquired land. And so, to answer your question, Stephen, yes. So I now write those things down, and when I look back at, wow, I actually had this conversation with Phil when we were starting years ago as to my goals and the next things that I wanted to do. An easy one was doing yoga, and then I look at where I'm at now, and I'm like, wow, I did those things. So now it's time to reevaluate, set new goals, and then see where I'm at, in a year or 2, 3 from now.
Everyone's going to think I paid him to say that.
you're our resident guru, though, Phil. You've made an impact on a lot of us. That's coming from the heart for sure. From Marc, you've definitely made an impact, and I think it's cool, Marc. Like, so I've had experiences like that where I've written down I wants, and then years later I'll find what I wrote and then realize, holy shit, those are now I ams, and it's like I've done those things, or I am that person that I wanted to be. There's nothing more fulfilling when you see, or motivating when you see the progress in what you're trying to do. And it's just writing that stuff. You can't accomplish it without writing it down. Like, you have a thought of, I want to do hot yoga. And then 2 years later, you're not going to remember you had that thought, and maybe you get around to doing it. But when you see it back, you're like, oh shit, I wrote that down 2 years ago or whatever. And now you're doing these things. There's something really powerful about it.
And I wouldn't have written it down if, when I had the meeting with Phil, he's like, okay, get a notepad and a paper. We're going to write it down. And it just so happens that, I moved about 4 months ago and I found it and it was written down.
Is that what you call it these days? The steaks in the backyard with beers? Yeah. You call it a meeting, or watching the Rams Cowboys game?
That's right.
It's multitasking. On that, with everything that you've achieved, this was so cool to see that the coming to fruition, right? Intentional life design and working toward that day in and day out, with also not all smooth sailing, right? I think that you've gone through a lot in regard to the last few years. with the passing of your mother, and that was something I know that was unexpected. And knowing what she meant to you and meeting her and what special woman she was, you've done a lot of work on that and tackling it head on. And not to put you on the spot here, but I am. I didn't prep you for it, but I just know you've put a lot of effort into that, and there could be people out there that are going through the same, and wanted to get your thoughts on how you process that.
Yeah. I lost my mom 2019. I mentioned earlier that selling my house, selling my house was one of the hardest things I had to do, and that's because that's the last time that I saw her before. I went back to Texas, and she was in the hospital. So it's one of those things where it took a lot of time, right? And a lot of that time for me to process it was with myself. I have a family. I have a daughter who needs my attention. She just turned 6 today. At the time, she was 3. I had my brothers and sisters back in El Paso. It was the hardest, most trying time I can say that our family as a unit had to deal with, right? I've had uncles, aunts pass that I'm not too close with. And I consider myself fortunate. The reason why I say that is my mother's side is there's 12 of them. My father's side, there's 8 of them. Between them and all the kids, there's about 40 grandchildren. And so I grew up with a ton of people
Catholic,
in my life.
Latino family.
Yes.
So many.
So I grew up with a ton of people in my life, and I did not experience my first funeral for someone that I knew until I was 30, 34. That is, to have that many people, family members in your circle, and not have to go to, my mom's aunt would pass away, but I didn't know who she was, and she was in Mexico and the like. But I knew my uncle was the first one, Uncle AC, that passed away, and I was 30 something at the time. Now that I think back on, that is a blessing to have that many people in your life and not experience death till that time. And then fast forward, my mom unexpectedly passed in 2019, and in that, it didn't break us, because it couldn't have broken us. It got us as far as a family unit. It made us closer together. There were times where we would argue, and at the time, when that's happening, everyone's in an emotional state. From that, though, we've gotten closer. We're more bonded in making intentional meetings to meet together for certain either holidays or coming out to each other. We're all on family threads. It was the hardest thing, but looking at it now, every single one of us is closer because we have to be. And the way I've changed in life is, how I was pre-mom passing, and the things that to me I considered this is what I want to acquire, this is what I want to get, this is important to me. Post that, completely 180. Complete 180, and I miss her every single day, but she's never forgotten. My dad and sister visit her grave every day. One of them will go every day. We're on a family thread, and every day someone posts a picture of her headstone. She's buried at a Fort Bliss cemetery in El Paso, Texas, with a visited mom, refreshed her flowers every single day. So when I get the chance and go out and visit, I tell them, take time off. It's my time. Let me be with my mom. Let me get those flowers. Let me sit there and just talk to her for an hour. But it's we're here now, and things are going good. But yeah, she's missed. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, that's an incredible story. I know that was tough for you to get through there, and I remember when she did pass, and we were there for you and talking you through, and different text messages, and just lots of prayers and thoughts for you and your family. And it's no question that you wear your heart on your sleeve. I know there's been a handful of fantasy football drafts that we've done and gotten together, and we've had open conversations about all sorts of stuff. And you got your wife and your daughter, and you're an amazing husband and father, and you just are very loyal and dedicated, and you have a lot of heart for people, and it's apparent. And, it's awesome to hear that, you were able to come together as a family and become even stronger. And that's a testament to your mother and how you were raised and all that stuff. So, blessed to know you, Mark. I mean, you're definitely a very good friend of mine, and obviously very, very good friend of Phil's. I'm pretty sure you were Phil's older brother or uncle or whatever you want to call it. But without you, we wouldn't know the Phil we know today. That's 100% true.
The old
That's
bull.
very true. The old bull and the young bull.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite traits of yours. As much crap as I give you all the time, that we've talked about over the years and really bonded on, is your ability to level with anybody in the room, regardless of socioeconomic status or life choices, whatever it is. Your ability to have a conversation and truly listen to those people in the room, even if you can't understand them, which happened over in Ireland at the wedding. But I wanted you to talk about, because I don't know if I've ever asked you where that comes from, and I know that, to kind of fast forward from where you talked about at Bank of America, now you are such a respected leader. People love working for you. And I think that's a big part of it, is you truly care about the other person on the other side of the conversation. So I wanted you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So it came from, I can tell you exactly where it came from. And then I can tell you the important thing about, leading people in my opinion. So it came from remember I told you how I was at B of A, and I knew I had a bad attitude. And that had to change. And part of that, when I got hired at Rocket, was, again, intentionally walking with my head up, saying hi to anybody that crosses my path, whether I know them or not. I don't know their position. And then what really helped me is I became I was a trainer. I was the underwriting trainer for about 2 years at Rocket. And when you're the underwriter trainer and have to teach people that you don't know that are coming in, and have to teach them how to underwrite, how to look at credit, income, assets, and property, and make decisions, you get people from that know more than others. You get people that do things completely different. And so you have to be one, I call it a chameleon, right? You have to mirror the person that you're speaking to the way they would understand something that they have a question about, right? And so I've always said being a social chameleon is one of my biggest traits, because and a lot of it came from being a trainer, having to do that class after class after class. And I got one of the I wouldn't say a mentor, but one of the bosses that I used to work for, that I remember specifically what he would tell me. Is he would tell me, it's not what you tell someone, it's how you tell them, right? Or what you say and how you say it. And I remember specifically, I'm going to compare two bosses I had when I was working at Countrywide. One of them was the phones are coming in, or the calls are coming in. You have a queue that you see there's 50 people waiting to take a call from a broker, right? I had just finished up alone doing my closing, comments, and then about to take another call. One boss would come over and tell me, "What are you doing? Take a call." That would get me so upset, because I wanted to say, "You think I'm just sitting here wasting time? I just locked a deal. I'm finishing up my notes. I'm going to take the next call." But it was the way he came at me that bothered me so much. Next boss I had would come by and he would tell me, "Hey, Mark." And I'm like, "Yeah." He would tell me, "You see that? You see the queue up there? You see those calls holding?" "Yep, I see it." "Next call you take, that's going to be a lock. You're going to lock that next call." I know what he was telling me. He was telling me, "Get off, not ready, take another call." But the way he said it versus the way my other boss said it were completely different. And so leading people, I want to be like that guy, like the guy that, gives you direction in a way you understand it, that is respectful, right? Because it takes respect to give respect. And I lead with respect, and so I expect it back. And in my opinion, the only way to do that is, one, to get to know the people that you're working with, so that when it comes time to either, delivering information, whether it's good news or bad, you know that the way you say something to someone, it might be completely different than the way you say the exact same thing to someone else.
Yeah, I love that chameleon aspect that you bring up. You're self-aware. You know what it is. Like, you want respect, and so you expect it back, and you're able to adapt in different situations, different types of people, and that's super important, obviously, in your career, but also in your life. And there's definitely a lot of fun stories that we could spend hours on this podcast on. We won't get into this time, so we'll have to get you back on for to go over some of those stories over the last 20 some years we've all known each other.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna close it out a little bit and ask you one final question. We always end the podcast with this question. Since you're an avid listener, you probably already know what's coming. But what does success mean to Marcos Rodriguez?
Yeah, man. And to your point, because I listen to your guys' podcast all the time, I knew that I was going to be on it. I'm like, how am I going to answer this, right? And I struggle with this one, and I'll tell you why. So I'll go back to a little bit my mom, right? Success. If you would ask me this question in prior 2019, my answer would have been completely different to what it is now, right? And so, what success means to me right now, it means to me, I heard on a podcast or maybe a saying or something, and Phil, I've talked to you about this before, that someone said once, when you die, you're presented with the best version of yourself that you could have been, right? And you look at that person eye to eye. And I'm not talking about monetary things, right? I'm talking about how, wealth in it. I'm talking about human, right? You're presented with the best human that you could have been, the best father, the best partner, the best brother, the best friend, the best everything. And you look that person eye to eye, right? And so, what success means to me is I want to get as close to that person that my mother raised her son to be, so that when that time comes, I can smile and say I'm there. And that is success to me.
Well, I know you're well on that path, and it never ends, right, until that moment. But just awesome to see the trajectory that you're on. I think that's the pod, fellas. Like, subscribe, let us know what you want to hear, and we'll be back at you next week.
Thank you guys for having me on. We'll see ya.
Thank you, brother.
Bye.